this tutorial, we're going to learn to knit these fingerless mitts. They're called the Runrig mitts, and these are designed by Annie of knitsofacto.com. It was just a few weeks ago that I had another tutorial on fingerless mitts, and I want to tell you these are completely different. The end result is about the same because we have fingerless mitts, but the technique is totally different. In the other fingerless mitts, we knit on double pointed needles and knit a tube in very, very simple pattern. These are knit from side to side, and they're full of good lessons that weren't available in the other fingerless mitts we did. Plus, they're really cool looking. We have a provisional cast on, and then we knit the whole mitt, and as we're doing it, we have a pico edge on the one side of the work, which is very unique and something that Annie has added. Adds a lot of bang for the buck to the finished mitt. Then at the end of the mitten, we do a different pico edge on the bind off row of the work, and we do a 3-needle bind off if you haven't done that before. So it's chock full of good lessons, and you end up with something that's really cute when you're finished. The pattern has instructions for both DK weight, which is a lighter weight yarn, and worsted weight. They both end up really nice. The worsted weight are a bit thicker and warmer, I would say, than the DK weight. Annie also gives us some explanation on how to size these for different people. And I'll tell you this, don't get too caught up in choosing a size. The basic size that she gives and the instructions she gives for DK and worsted weight fit a wide range of sizes because they're really stretchy mitts. I did a little experiment, a little test on my own to see just how stretchy they are and how well they fit. And I have pretty narrow hands, and these are just the straight up DK weight instructions that Annie gives us. And when I was at Knitting Group a couple weeks ago, I handed one of these to my friend Steven, and he has much broader, manly hands. He tried it on, and he said, gosh, these feel great. That's one thing you notice with these mitts. They really feel good on. The ribbing is nice, it feels good. But the point is that this size also fit his hands because of how stretchy they are. So don't get too caught up in the sizes you pick. The basic size that she gives will fit most hands. I think that's it. I think we're about ready to get started. Oh, I can tell you this. The finished mittens don't use up very much yarn. For this weight of yarn, I used 32 grams of yarn, and for the worsted weight, finished mitt was 35 grams. So you can use less than 100 grams gain for either pair of these. So next up, we're going to get started with the provisional cast on and knitting the first part of the mitten. The first part of these mittens starts with a provisional cast on, and there are different ways of doing this. I'm going to show you how to do a crocheted provisional cast on, and what that allows us to do is start the cast on from this crochet chain, and then when we finish knitting the whole mitten, we go back and undo that crochet chain, which will leave us live stitches. So it's a way of having live stitches at both ends of the work, the cast on and the bind off end. It'll make more sense when we get the whole thing done, but I want to show you how to do the provisional cast on, which is something that you will find useful in a lot of different knitting projects once you know how to do it. Let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to be using much, much bulkier yarn and a bigger crochet hook than the pattern calls for, so you can see what I'm doing. You'll want to start with a yarn that is not the color of the yarn that you're going to use for the mittens. You want to be able to see a difference. So I'm going to be using this color of blue yarn for the mitts, but I'm going to use this red yarn for the provisional cast on so I can see. And for both the DK weight and the worsted weight, I recommend using worsted weight yarn and a size H or 5mm crochet hook. It might seem kind of big, but you want to be able to see what you're doing with the provisional cast on. I'm going to start by tying a knot, and that's so I can tell which end is the slip knot end by feeling it. So there's my knot, and now I do a slip knot. And you'll follow your instructions for how many you need to crochet chain. If you have never made a crochet chain, I'll give you a link to a video here that will go over it slowly for you. It's really simple. You're just going to grab the yarn and pull it through like this. But if you need a slower demonstration, the video will help. you're going to pick up 53 stitches. And so I recommend chaining more than that, so you have some extras on both ends. So I chained 58 when I made my mittens. But for the sample, I'm not going to do that many. I'm just going to chain some. You can break the yarn. You're not going to be using that color anymore, and fasten it off. So now we're left with this crochet chain, and the right side of the crochet chain is made up of these V's, right? Okay, the wrong side is what I call the hyphens. You'll see these little horizontal marks right in the center of the back of the crochet chain. That's what we're going to knit into when we make the provisional cast on. Now you want to have the slip knot end over here to the right. We're going to pick up from right to left, and you know your slip knot end because you tied that knot in the yarn. So here you're going to need your needles and your yarn. And you don't have to start with the very first hyphen because we did some extras. I'll go into the second one. So you first you drop your needles on the floor. You can skip that dropping the needles part. There's the hyphen. You put your needle under that hyphen, take your working yarn and fold it over, leaving yourself about a 6-inch tail. Wrap that loop around the needle, lots of tension on that, and pull it through. It's like knitting with one needle. So now I can drop the tail and just hold on to the working yarn, find the next hyphen, go under that, wrap the needle, tension on the working yarn, and pull it through. Under the next hyphen. This is it. You're making a provisional cast on. And you'll get really good at it if you're going to pick up 53 stitches for the mittens. Try not to split the stitches. You see when I'm putting the needle under the hyphen, I kind of poke around to make sure that it's going in easily. If you do split the stitches, it's not that big of a deal. I'll show you how to get around that later in the video. Okay. There's your provisional cast on. Now in the pattern, Annie tells us to join garment yarn and knit 1 row. Count that as knitting 1 row and go ahead and start out with row 1 right now. And what this is going to do, the pattern from here on out, is give us this garter stitch rib, which runs horizontally, and the picot edge at the end. So the garter stitch rib is easy enough, of course, and we're going to learn how to do the picot edge right here in a 4-row repeat. You'll probably want to keep track of your rows for the first bit. So the first row, row 1, which is wrong side, is just knitting to the end. Okay. Row 2 is to knit 1, because we have a garter stitch edge on the side opposite the picot, and then purl to the last 2 stitches, and then that's where it starts to get interesting. Okay, so I purled to the last 2 stitches, and I'm going to knit front back, or KFB, a 1-stitch increase in each one of these stitches. So I pulled the yarn back between the 2 needles, and I do a normal knit stitch, but I don't pull that old stitch off the left needle. I swing the tip of my needle around to the back loop of that stitch, wrap it, and pull it through. And I've increased by 1. Do the same thing in this last stitch. Start out with a normal knit stitch, swing the tip of your needle around to the back loop of that stitch, put it in there, wrap it, and pull it through. And so I've increased by 2. Then row 3, we're going to decrease by 2 and get back down to the count that we had before. So first thing you do is you slip one knitwise. I always say when you slip stitches, you always slip as if to purl unless the pattern tells you otherwise. The pattern's telling you otherwise in this case. So put your needle in, slip one stitch as if to knit, and then knit the next stitch. And this is where the decrease comes in. We're going to pass this first stitch over the second one, just like binding off. So you put your left needle in there and just bind it off. Then you're going to purl one and pull this stitch over this one, pass this stitch over the purl stitch. So you've decreased by 2 by basically binding off 2. And you can already see that you have this little bit of knitting that's sticking out from the edge of the work, which is the picot edge. And then you're going to purl to the last stitch and knit one, because we always knit the stitches at this end to maintain a garter stitch edge. Okay, so that was row 3. And then row 4 is just a plain knit row. You'll repeat those 4 rows another 16 or 18 times, depending on whether you're doing the DK or the worsted weight. That means that you will either do it 19 or 17 times total. And then next up in the video, we're going to cover the first thumb picot row, which is a different kind of picot edging. After you've followed the pattern and worked all the way around, you're ready to work the first picot edge on the thumb row, which is what I'm going to show you how to do right now. Let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, my sample is huge, as you can see. It isn't proportionally correct, but I'm doing it this big so you can really see what I'm doing. You're going to want to follow the pattern to make sure that you're getting the numbers right. I'm just going to show you the technique here. So I've completed the whole mitt. I'm ready to start doing this, thumb roll, the thumb hole picot edge roll. So I'm going to work up to the stitches in the previous row that I knit. Let me go ahead and take a look at this and explain it. The first picot thumb row, you're going to work the second half of the picot edge over here, and then you're going to be purling some stitches to kind of get ready for the picot edge thumb row. And so I skipped that one because all it is knitting and purling. I want to show you how to work the cable cast on part of the picot edge. So you're going to work up to that, following your pattern. So the pattern tells us, between the little asterisks, it tells us to cable cast on 2 stitches. So to do that, you look at your left needle and the 2 stitches. You want to make a stitch between these 2 stitches. That's where you're going to put your needle. Wrap it and pull it through, and then give it a little twist as you put it up on the needle, so that the stitch is mounted correctly. And you want your stitches mounted with the right leg in front. I'm going to show you this again. You're going to cable cast on another stitch, which means between these 2 stitches, right there. Wrap it and pull it through, and then give it a little twist as you put it on the needle. Now you're going to bind off 4 stitches, which will make the little bump. So knit 2, bind off 1, knit 1, bind off 2, knit 1, bind off 3, knit 1, bind off 4. Now I spoke that aloud so that you could really get an idea of where you start counting the bind off. The actual action of pulling one stitch over the other counts as 1. The knit stitches leading up to the bind off don't count. Okay, so we're left here and we have our first little bump. You're going to take the stitch on the right needle and put it back over to the left. So we're ready to work 2 more cable cast on stitches. So again, between the 2 needles, wrap it and pull it through, give it a little twist, set it up on the needle. The second one, between the 2 needles, wrap it and pull it through, give it a little twist and put it up on the needle. Now we're ready for the bind off. To prepare for the bind off, I'm going to knit 2. And there is bind off number 1. Knit 1, bind off number 2, knit 1, bind off number 3, knit 1, bind off number 4. And that's the repeat for the picot edge for the thumb bind off. You'll follow the pattern and repeat that as many times as the pattern tells you. Next up, we're going to unzip the provisional cast on. Now we're ready to unzip the provisional cast on so that we have live stitches at both the almost bind off row and the cast on row. Let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, we're back to my giant bulky sample, and we did the cast on in this red yarn so we'd be able to see the crochet chain, and that's going to really help us as we go to take it back out. And remember, we tied a knot in the slip knot end, and that's where we started the cast on. Okay, this time we don't want to be at the slip knot end. We want to be at the end with no knot in it, the non-slip knot end. I don't know any other name for it. And we want to start unzipping the provisional cast on. And you remember how we fastened this off? We just pulled the tail end through the last loop. So that's how you're going to start unzipping it, is just to pull that tail end back. And then the first cast on stitch is usually pretty wonky. Oh, it's not going to happen this time. The stitch is wonky though. So that's our first cast on stitch. I'm working in another pattern right now where I have a provisional cast on and the tail end yarn is always running through it. You get different experiences depending on whether you're tying knots in things as you change color, different things going on. With this pattern, that's what I've got for my first stitch. Okay. Now, here I am at the first provisional cast on stitch. And it's a V with the red yarn running through it. I want to come at that V and poke into the center of that V from the back, and that's going to mount the stitch correctly. And then I can pull out a little bit of the crochet chain. There's the next V. I do this one by one, so there are no live stitches that can come unzipped. And you remember, I'm using this super bulky yarn that's so easy to see. If you start losing provisional cast on stitches with this really fine yarn, it's going to be more difficult. So one at a time, slow and steady. There's the next V. I poke into the center of the V from back to front, pull out one more crochet chain. Come at the center of the V from back to front, pop. I hope I run into a snag so I can show you how to fix it. Sometimes the crochet chain yarn will be snagged across the stitch. That pretty much happens in every provisional cast on that I do. And if this ends up being a perfect sample with no mistake in it, it's going to be a miracle. It hasn't happened yet, though. I might have to fake like it's happened. Okay, I'm going to fake like we have a snag here, because we kind of do, halfway. Sometimes you'll split the stitch, and you can see I've got a little bit of red yarn running kind of into this stitch and there, and if you can't pull it out, you can just take your scissors and cut those little threads of yarn to smooth it out, to get it to detach from itself. And here's the rule of thumb. You can always, always cut the provisional color of yarn. That's why we did this in 2 different colors. Don't ever cut the main color, but if something is snagging, always cut the yarn in the provisional cast-on color. It's always safe to do that. Okay, sometimes the last stitch is goofy. This one's not, but the yarn is running through it. So just pull it out. And there we have live stitches ready to go. And I have live stitches on this end too. And next up, we're going to do a 3-needle bind off to close that up. And we'll also do the pico edge on the other side of the thumb. You're already almost done with these mittens. We're going to do a 3-needle bind off after using the provisional cast on, unzipping it, and doing the 3-needle bind off. That lets us bind off and seam at the same time, which is very handy. Let's go ahead and take a look. After unzipping the 3-needle bind off, I have live stitches on each end of this sample, and we're going to put the 2 sides together and start the 3-needle bind off. And for those of you who are pretty eagle-eyed, you'll notice that the needle I'm using for the 3-needle bind off is a bit smaller. You usually want to go up a needle size to do this bind off, just in case your bind off is going to be tight. But I neglected to bring this needle size with me, and this is what I had. The technique is still the same, and God knows no one can wear these mittens as they are anyway, so we're going to be fine. My first provisional cast-on stitch was twisted. I'm going to put it back on there correctly. Remember, stitches are mounted correctly when the right leg is in front. So you line your stitches up like this on the 2 needles, and you have a 3rd empty needle in your right hand. And this is a 3-needle bind off that you'll see in a lot of different patterns. The technique is the same. You go in as if to knit in the first stitch on the front needle, as if to knit the first stitch on the back needle. Wrap this and pull it through both stitches. And then carefully slide both stitches off both needles. You have 1 stitch. Go into the first stitch on the front needle, go into the first stitch on the back needle, wrap the needle, pull it through the first, then the second, pull those 2 stitches off the left needles. Now remember, this is a bind off, so now that we have 2 stitches, we can start doing the bind off part. I'm going to use the tip of the needle in back, grab that stitch and pull it over the other one, and that's 1 stitch bound off. Okay, now we'll do another one, another stitch with both needles, into the first, into the second, wrap it, pull it through 1, 2, off, and now we can do the bind off. This is not the quickest technique in the world, but it is really effective, saving a seam from later. I guess it does take a little bit of skill to keep these stitches close to the end of the needle without them accidentally flying off, which is what slows things down a little bit. To talk through it again, go in as if to knit in the first needle, the front stitch, the first stitch on the front needle, the first stitch on the back needle, wrap it, pull it through first, and the second one, pull those off the left needle, and bind another stitch off. Okay, that's the technique. I'm going to go ahead and speed through this and work up to, you're going to follow your pattern. My sample, again, does not use real numbers from the pattern, but it's here to show the technique. You'll work up until you have no more stitches to work on one of the needles, because you'll run into the bind off stitches for the thumb. And I'll show you what that means. Okay. I have no more stitches to work. Well, I have more, but they're way down here on the back needle. So I'm ready to do the picot bind off on this side. So the picot bind off on this side is going to be just like the other side. We'll start by taking the stitch that we have on the right needle and sliding it over to the left. And I'm going to cable cast on 2, which means putting a stitch between the 2 stitches, making a new stitch, giving it, giving it a little, let me try that again. Wrapping it, pulling it through, giving it a little twist, and putting it up on the left needle. And we'll do that again. Let me loosen that up. Putting it on the left needle. Okay, and then we'll bind off 4. The bind off starts out with 2 knit stitches. Then you pull the 1 stitch over the other, and that counts as 1 bind off. Knit another one. That counts as 2 bind off. Knit another one. 3. 4. Then you'll put the stitch on the right needle back over to the left and do it again. And you'll make as many picot bumps on this side as you did on the other side. And then you'll continue with the 3 needle bind off to finish off the other half of the mitt, just like we did on this end. Many thanks to Annie of knitsofacto.com for letting us use her pattern in this tutorial. Good luck.